As Christians, we're taught these things, like God's going to meet all your needs. And I don't know if you've ever had this thought where you're like, oh God, you said you'd meet all my needs. But what if he decides not to? Because God, he has the higher thought, the higher power. His will, his thoughts are beyond our thoughts. He's great. You get this sense that he's thinking is so far beyond ours that he said he would meet all of our needs, but what if he decides that's not his will? What if his will is something different? And so I can remember, just in the darkest place of depression over just our financial disaster, our financial hopelessness, and just this place of complete darkness in that area. And say what you want about being content and all that stuff about, less is better, whatever. But when you're in financial disaster, it affects you. It affects your marriage, it affects your life, it affects your health, it affects your emotional well-being. And a lot of my life was spent in depression over just financial disaster. And so but I can distinctly remembering praying, God, you said you'd meet all our needs, but wait a minute, what if he doesn't? What if he decides not to? That whole, if it's your will, would you please do this, God? And the same thing with healing. You said, a lot of times Christians, they like to say, by his stripes we are healed, or, he will heal, he heals our bodies and all that thing. But then we think, but if it's your will, if it's your will, it might not be your will that I'm healed. Maybe it's your will that I'm sick and decrepit and always going to the hospital, and maybe that's your will, and so we kind of have this sort of doubt, maybe it's not God's will and that's why it's not happening, and there's not a change. Maybe I'm supposed to be content and happy with living this miserable existence. Maybe I'm supposed to be content being in poverty. Maybe I'm supposed to be content in being completely sick and ill my whole life. This is kind of what we start believing and thinking, that, I must not have enough faith because God's not healing me. It must be his will because he's not healing me. And it wasn't until Matt and I took a whole nother approach to that concept. It finally became clear to me when I read the scripture where Jesus was talking and he said, I have come to give you life, and that much more abundant. And if Jesus said he came to give us life, but not just a miserable life, he came to give us an abundant life. So what does that mean? It means abundant in all areas, abundant in our mental health, abundant in our physical health, abundant in our financial health, abundant in our relationship health. The fact is that Jesus said he came to give us an abundant life. And so I began to pray a prayer that I want to share with you guys. And I hope that you will take this prayer and make it your own. Make this your prayer in any area of your life that you have found as a struggle. And that is, Jesus, you said, you promised that you came to give me life, and an abundant life. And I'm telling you right now, Jesus, being in poverty is not an abundant life. So I know without a shadow of a doubt that this poverty I'm living in is not your will. Same thing with health issues. God, I am sick in my body, and my body is not living an abundant life. This is not abundance. So guess what? This is not your will. And I began to really call God out on it. You said you came to give me abundant life. And if you are honest and true in what you say, then I'm calling you out on it. I want an abundant life. I want what you've promised me. And so I stopped really questioning or doubting God in what he said he would give and promise. But it meant that I had to change my thought process as well. So I couldn't let myself run down that rabbit hole of fear, the what ifs. I couldn't let myself cycle through all the worst case scenarios anymore. I had to really capture my thoughts. You know, it's one of those things that I feel like all the battles in our life, all the struggles in our life is won in our head first. It has to be won here before it can be won out in the real world. And so that's where I started. I stopped looking at the physical world around me and I started really battling here.